Imagine two people. One tells you, "I don't want you anymore." The other never says anything at all. They reply hours later. Their eyes drift away when you speak. Your pain is ignored. Your joy goes unnoticed. They stay close enough that you can't leave, but distant enough that you never feel loved. Now here's the strange part. Most people think rejection is the deepest emotional wound. Psychology suggests something even more painful. Being emotionally neglected often leaves scars that last much longer than being rejected. Because rejection gives you an answer. Neglect gives you a question. One your mind keeps trying to solve for years. And according to Carl Jung's understanding of the unconscious, the questions we never answer often become the prisons we live inside. So why does emotional neglect hurt so deeply? Why do people spend years chasing someone who barely noticed them? And how can one invisible wound silently shape your relationships, confidence, and identity? Stay until the end. Because the final realization might completely change how you understand your own past. Part 1, The Invisible Pain. A broken bone receives sympathy. A broken heart receives advice. But emotional neglect often receives nothing. No dramatic goodbye. No obvious betrayal. No fight. Just silence. And silence is dangerous because the human brain naturally searches for meaning. When someone rejects you, your brain eventually accepts reality. But when someone gives you tiny pieces of affection, then disappears, then comes back, your mind never gets closure. Instead it keeps asking, what did I do wrong? Maybe if I become better. Maybe tomorrow they'll finally love me. The relationship ends. But the emotional search continues. Sometimes for years. Part 2, Why the Brain Can't Let Go. Our brains aren't designed merely to seek love. They're designed to seek certainty. Uncertainty keeps our nervous system alert. Think about an unfinished sentence. Your mind automatically wants to finish it. Emotional neglect creates unfinished emotional sentences. Every ignored message. Every forgotten birthday. Every conversation where your feelings were dismissed becomes another unfinished chapter. Instead of healing, your mind keeps reopening the book. This is why many people become obsessed with those who neglected them. Not because they were deeply loved, but because they were never emotionally understood. Part 3, Carl Jung's Shadow. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a hidden part of themselves. The shadow. It contains the emotions we've learned to hide. The fear of being unwanted. The fear of not being enough. The fear that love must be earned. Emotional neglect doesn't create these fears from nothing. It awakens them. If you constantly needed someone's attention, their neglect begins to whisper. You're invisible. You're forgettable. You're not important. Eventually, those whispers stop sounding like someone else's voice. They become your own. That's how neglect quietly changes identity. Not overnight, but one silent moment at a time. Part 4, The Most Dangerous Habit. Here's something many people never realize. Emotionally neglected people often become experts at ignoring themselves. They say, "I'm okay," even when they're exhausted. They tell others, "It's not a big deal," even when their heart is breaking. Why? Because they learned an invisible lesson. My feelings don't matter. Over time, they stop asking for help. Stop expressing needs. Stop expecting kindness. And eventually, they become emotionally absent from their own lives. The tragedy isn't simply that someone neglected them. The tragedy is that they continue to neglect themselves. Part 5, Why We Chase Emotionally Distant People. Have you noticed something strange? Many people leave healthy relationships, and become obsessed with emotionally unavailable ones. That isn't weakness. It's familiarity. If emotional neglect existed in childhood, or became normalized in important relationships, your unconscious may mistake emotional distance for emotional attraction. Not because it's healthy, but because it's familiar. The mind often chooses what it recognizes, before it chooses what it deserves. This explains why someone who barely texts back, shows little affection, or remains emotionally cold, can occupy your thoughts far more than someone who genuinely cares. The mystery feels exciting. The uncertainty feels addictive. But beneath that excitement is usually an old wound asking to be healed. Part 6, The Silent Damage. Emotional neglect rarely screams. It whispers. It slowly teaches you to question yourself. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You become afraid of expressing needs. You overthink simple conversations. You celebrate tiny acts of attention. Because you've been starving emotionally. Someone finally asks, "How are you?" And it feels extraordinary. Not because it's extraordinary, but because you've lived without it for so long. This is why neglect changes self-worth. When affection becomes rare, even crumbs begin to feel like a feast. Part 7, The Turning Point. Here's the truth that changes everything. Healing doesn't begin when the other person finally understands you. Healing begins when you stop needing them to. That doesn't mean pretending the pain never happened. It means recognizing something powerful. Someone else's inability to love consistently is not proof that you were difficult to love. Some people cannot give what they never learned to receive. Their emotional absence belongs to their story, not your value. This realization frees you, because you stop measuring your worth through someone else's silence. Part 8, Becoming Emotionally Present. Imagine treating yourself the way you wished someone else had. Listening to your own emotions. Respecting your boundaries. Allowing yourself to cry without shame. Speaking honestly instead of staying quiet to keep peace. Little by little, the neglected child inside you begins to trust again. Not because someone rescued them, but because you finally showed up. That is where confidence is born. Not from becoming perfect, but from refusing to abandon yourself. Perhaps the greatest tragedy isn't being rejected. It's spending years begging for emotional attention from people who were never capable of giving it. Rejection closes a door. Emotional neglect leaves it half open. Just enough for hope to keep walking back inside. But today, you can close that door yourself. Not with anger. Not with revenge. With understanding. Because the moment you stop chasing emotional validation, you begin discovering emotional freedom. Remember this. The people who truly value you won't make you wonder every day whether you matter. Real love doesn't survive on confusion. It grows through consistency. If this video helped you see yourself, or someone from your past, in a new light, don't keep that insight to yourself. Share it with someone who may need these words today. And if you're ready to understand human nature, relationships, and the hidden patterns shaping your life, subscribe to Psyche Sync. Because sometimes the deepest transformation doesn't begin with changing the world around you. It begins the moment you finally stop neglecting yourself.